This afternoon we're going to swap some rigid forks with some suspension forks. There's one or two compatibility issues, brake caliper being one. The old forks are international standard, which we're just freeing from the brake caliper now, and the new ones are post mount, so we're not going to be able to finish the job. We'll have to do that in a brake video another time. It's well worth noting that a bike should be clean when you put it back together. This one's not particularly, so make sure everything's nice and spick and span, particularly when working on bearings. The brake needs to be detached from the fork, so we can replace the fork. We're just snipping them now, and then after that we can extract the fork. The top cap then comes off, but not before you undo the stem bolts. Alternately top and bottom, or bottom top, but just don't overdo one and then try and unscrew the other. You want to loosen them off simultaneously, slowly, so it doesn't damage the threads. Then once those stem bolts are released, you can then whip the top cap off. Pop. After that come the spacers, 1, 2, 3, and then the different elements that make up the headset. So first, the top cap. It's actually held on with a rubber seal on the inside, which makes it a bit tricky at times to get it on and off. So it can be easier to move the fork around up and down just to give it some space, and then you can pull them out. So then there's a tiny 1mm washer. Then you've got your wedge spacer. Then you pull out the sealed cartridge bearing top and bottom. And then finally the crown race comes off. This is a Hope easy fit jobby. It has a little slit in the back which enables you to push it on and off. If your crown race doesn't have a slit in the back, then you'll need a crown race installation tool, so you probably need to go and talk to your bike shop about that. So next up, bottom cartridge bearing sits on the crown race, then slide the fork through in the head tube. Next up, the top seal cartridge bearing goes on, sleight of hand, you didn't see that. You have to take my word for it. Then your wedge spacer thing jams into the top of the seal cartridge bearing. Then your 1mm spacer. Finally the top cap again, remembering that rubber seal on the Hope headsets can be a bit sticky and pop out. You can damage it, so be really careful getting that on. Once you've got it on, it can help to rotate it a bit to help it move freely. Bit of GT85 didn't go amiss as well. So now get the spacer quantity right. In this instance, I've stuck on too many spacers. The top clamp bolt and the bottom clamp bolt don't both pinch round the steerer tube, so I had to take off the second spacer. At this point, the steerer tube is 1 or 2mm lower than the top of the stem, enabling the compression cap to put the right load on the bearing when you tighten it up. Finally, wheel on, and then the brake caliper back on. If you have international standard like this one is, you can just unbolt it and then bolt it back on again, no brake setup. The forks that we've just installed have a Manitou post mount attachment, which means it's going to need a new brake caliper adapter that you would need to set up each time, and we'll do that in another video. So finally, we tighten the bearing to taste, so not too tight, not too loose. We want it tight enough so there's no play, but loose enough so the bearings feel silky smooth. Once you've got that, you can then tighten the stem bolts, again alternately top, bottom, bottom, top, so you don't put too much strain on any of the threads. It's worth revisiting loading that top cap if you don't get it perfect. Too loose and they'll be playing the bearings, too tight and they'll prematurely crunch themselves to pieces. So keep going back to it and get that perfect. Become a master before you ride it. It's well worth revisiting it again 2 weeks later perhaps, maybe even a week later, just to make sure everything's settled down, because everything can compress. Thanks very much. This is Perlie Rides.